so in the last 2 months of the acquisition, we're seeing so much more growth. We're seeing opportunities, doors that have opened to us. So people who didn't know who we were are understanding who we are today at a very high level, and are able to translate that into how can we turn that into an opportunity for the company. And we may not have had access to that in the past. For SMEs to kind of grow in this market and associate themselves with big brands and names, and do that organically to skip the length of time, I think it's a great way to kind of go to market. And we're seeing that.
Welcome, Joshua.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Bidzi Way podcast. This is going to be interesting because the way the cameras are set up, your head's going to keep going back and
Yeah,
forth.
I'm just keep going up and down,
Just bobbling left and right.
That's fine.
Now, listen, thank you so much for coming today. We wanted to take this time to kind of unpack your journey with Bidzi over the last year or so. So for those who don't know, would you mind giving us a brief introduction of your former life in MiLab Scientific? What did you do? What was your role, and so on?
Yeah, so MiLab Scientific is a laboratory-based trading company. So we specialize in genetics and testing. So whatever solution we could provide in terms of testing, whether it be in the medical, veterinary, food market, we would do that. And Dad and I kind of conceptualized the business a couple of years ago in terms of how can we go to the market with a solution? How can we be unique, and how can we kind of go to market and understand what customers really want, and be cost effective as well as push the product out in a more efficient way. And that led me to kind of lead the business with Dad, where he looked after the back office stuff and I looked after the the front office stuff. As the director, the sales team was under me, the service team was under me, and still is under me. And that kind of is MiLab in a nutshell. It's my baby and still is.
Amazing. And then how long have you been with MiLab?
So as a family, we've been in this industry for about 40 years.
Amazing.
But MiLab as a brand was conceptualized in 2018.
Okay, so 2018 to 2025.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
Amazing. And how do you feel the healthcare industry has evolved over that time? We've had COVID, we've had massive fundamental shifts in the way the industry has been structured.
So I think that the industry has evolved to provide better for longevity, right? So today everybody is about health, wellness, longevity. And I think that the industry is moving towards that while trying to be more cost efficient. And COVID kind of really spoke for that. Pre-COVID, laboratory was just a background in the industry, right? So it was more about the doctors, their thought process. Today, people are more about testing, understanding what they have. They are doing predictive testing, or pre-testing, screening. So these are things that were not part of the past. I mean, if you had asked someone, would you test certain parts of the city for wastewater, for viruses, to understand where influenza may pop up, that did not exist. But that exists today. So there's more preventive testing today. And I think that has kind of where the industry has evolved. And prevention is better than cure. So that is kind of where the industry has led. And I think MiLab has had a role to play in that, in terms of trying to provide high throughput screening at a cost efficient price point.
Amazing.
That's the idea, effectively.
Amazing.
And MiLab fits perfectly in that, because we plug and play in not only in the medical industry, but in, for example, wastewater, in TB screening, in the food industry. And this proactive approach is the idea that the government in the UAE has taken, which is great for our people, right? It's great for our population. It's great for trying to make sure that, we were first to market post-COVID, and that's how you've seen the influx of immigration, right? So that's one of the key factors that I think that people have moved here is our proactive approach in things, and lab has a lot to do with that.
So, Joshua, one thing I noticed about you in our interactions, right, over the course of the deal is you've got it comes across that you're super passionate about your industry, right? You have a very deep knowledge. I remember during due diligence, the questions that were coming up, you were not just answering them, but you were really kind of deep diving into the responses. And I know, as a matter of fact, that your presence and you being part of MiLab was one of the big drivers for the buyer and why they thought that this is an even more interesting industry. So is that something you've always been passionate about? Has it grown? Because it's a very technical area. So how did that develop?
I mean, it's a simple philosophy, right? Love what you do and do what you love, right? And that's kind of where I enjoy what I do. I think there's a lot of value behind screening, preventive approach, understanding things, pre them happening. And that's kind of where we pivoted the business from basic general laboratory trading and equipment to kind of being really specialized in what we do. And I think that was a key element for the buyer in terms of how can we add to that? How can we be solution providers? How can MiLab integrate with the portfolio that they have existingly to kind of be whole solution providers? And the whole idea for all of this in terms of MiLab was trying to kind of backward and forward integrate for growth, right? And that I think was, one of the key elements in terms of thinking of an acquisition or thinking of synergizing with a bigger firm that will grow the company, and that was kind of a key element in that. And my passion comes from the stuff that I do, and I don't intend to kind of leave it. As I said, MiLab is my baby and will continue to be mine. So even though on paper it may not be mine, it's still my business. I love what I do. I enjoy what I do, and I intend to kind of pursue that.
And I think that leads actually quite nicely into the next question for you, which is, what was the key driver for you and your father when you made a decision that, okay, we're going to look to exit the business? What was that conversation? Was it just something that happened? What brought you to that point?
So we needed to grow, and we had reached a critical mass in terms of how far we can take the business.
You mean that's the existing team, Dad, and the team underneath
right?
you? Okay.
In the market today, healthcare is evolving so quickly. You're seeing, an oligopolistic kind of market happening, right? So you've got 6 or 7 big guys coming into the market, and for you to kind of grow your business, you've got to be one of them or you've got to be with them.
Right.
And the journey to be one of those fastest and grow fastest would be to be with them. And the whole idea behind the acquisition was around growth. It was never to let go of the business. The intention is to completely own the business, continue to own what we are doing, direct it in the direction of growth, and have that backing to kind of have us grow. So in simplicity, it was never about letting go or anything about any of that. It's about growing the business. It's just that simple. How can we take it to the local markets around the GCC? How can we grow that? How can we use what we have now as a backing to go forward? And that's pretty much, in simplicity, that was the key reason to scale, to sell the business, was to actually have it synergize with someone.
Fine. So, understanding that you've reached a point where your existing infrastructure could only take the business so far.
Right.
But looking almost beyond what's very kind of natural for a lot of business owners, especially of SMEs, that they struggle to let go. So I think that's a really big step that you and your father took, decided that, look, we brought it here now to see MiLab as an entity on its own, beyond Joshua and beyond your father. I think that's a really big step, and that's a very interesting step where a lot of entrepreneurs don't recognize that, and they get stuck in that ownership mindset. And that's why, unfortunately, some great companies don't live up to the expectation that they can.
I think more than that, we were very comfortable with the buyers. I think through this journey, Bidzi has brought a lot of people to the table, and we were most comfortable with our current buyers because they let us maintain that sense of ownership, that sense of feeling of continuing to own that business. So I think there was a comfort level with our buyers in terms of we will still own the business, we will still get to run it, and
Right.
I think that level of comfort was established, which enabled us to kind of take the back seat.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a great little nugget for anyone that's listening that is maybe a buyer, that recognizing where there's a lot of value from the founder level, right? They know the business inside out, and buyers sometimes also have this mindset of, no, it's mine and I will drive it forwards. But in your case, I think it's a perfect example of a sophisticated and a very mature buyer that understands what value they're bringing, and with that value and infrastructure that they bring, what you as an existing founder of the business can take it to the next level. And I think that's a great lesson for buyers generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for an SME of my level, there are two ways to scale, right? So there's one is you take investment in and then you use that money to grow, or you associate with someone that gives you this kind of comfort level and helps you expand while still maintaining your self of ownership within the facility. And that was key for us. And I think for SMEs to kind of grow in this market and associate themselves with big brands and names, and do that organically to skip the length of time, I think it's a great way to kind of go to market. And we're seeing that, right? So in the last 2 months of the acquisition, we're seeing so much more growth. We're seeing opportunities, doors that have opened to us, and visibility. So people who didn't know who we were are understanding who we are today at a very high level, and are able to translate that into how can we turn that into an opportunity for the company. And we may not have had access to that in the past. So that is kind of a key driver that has really, opened my eyes in the last 2 months. Simply in those 2 months, the change is just day and night, really.
Wonderful.
And basically, the acquisition, while you were already had gone from 0 to 10, this acquisition has helped you, or given you the runway to go from 10 to 100.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Which was the idea of the acquisition, and it's kind of worked out in that way. And that's in all honesty, credit to our buyers who have really given us that opportunity. That's all I can say to that.
So Joshua, when you and I first started talking about potentially selling your business, I know you were in two minds about whether you wanted to pursue this route of getting acquired or continue running independently. And I'm sure there might have been apprehensions about, what will happen when we get acquired. When you look back, when we first started talking, what do you think was the biggest concern that you had as you individually and as a family in terms of pursuing this approach to, raise the bar to the next level?
So I think there are two sides to it. One is an emotional side to it, and one is a financial side to it, right? So my dad is just hitting his retirement, right? And the business is coming into the next generation. And the emotional side of it was, what will he do after, right? So I think a big apprehension on selling the business was, okay, what is my dad going to do after, right? And that's a big play with a lot of SMEs today, where these generational businesses then translate, because these guys came in the 50s, 60s. The story always starts off, I came with 1 dirham in my pocket or something to that extent, and built, right? And they spent their whole lives building, and that's all they know, right? And my father especially still comes to the office at 6:15, leaves at 4:30. That's all he knows, right? So the idea is, the apprehension was about what will he do? And that's the emotional side of it, right? So when you look at that side, you're thinking, okay, maybe we should keep the business for him.
Okay.
But is that good for the business? And then again, as much as I'm marketing my buyers, they were so good in the sense that they said that he can still come to the office and work as he pleases.
And is he coming in still and getting involved?
He gets involved at his leisure, sometimes more than I'd like, but it's great, right? So even though the business has been acquired, he still is busy, which is so important at that age, right?
Right.
So that was one of the levels of apprehension. The second level, the second concern from the financial side was, okay, what will happen to our revenue streams or our income streams and things like that? And you've got to kind of think of that as an SME, especially if you're a company that has is self-funded and is kind of like the money coming home is from that, right? So we had to kind of think of all those things and align with those things. So I think those were the two apprehensions. Okay. But again, I can't credit the buyers enough. They spoke to all these things, so I now have a job per se, right? And so does Dad, which is great.
So what I'm hearing is a potential loss of purpose, right? Especially for the founder who's built something from scratch, right? And when you're selling something, it might get taken away. So what do you do in that circumstance?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of in Dubai, you've got a lot of these SMEs like myself, right? And I think that's a key problem, I would say, with a lot of these founders who have reached a critical mass, critical saturation point in their business, and they need to kind of understand that the next level is growth, and in this market to grow you can't be emotional about it.
And that's a very important thing, which we also see. What got you from 0 to 1 is not necessarily what's going to get you from 1 to 10.
10, yeah.
Right? And you have to change your surroundings, your circumstances, the way you look at your business, the way you run your business. And I think that goes exactly to what you're saying right now.
Absolutely. Not only from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and until you reach that 100 point, right? So at every single point, you've got to kind of realign with who's around you, who you're with, and how you're scaling the business, basically.
Perfect.
So I want to touch on an interesting, quite unique to this transaction point, was how you came about Bidzi and how we entered your universe, because I know there's a backstory to that,
right,
which people that are watching won't know, but please openly share it.
Well, I think it was me giving Asif a challenge per se, right? Right.
And you can tell everyone what our background is.
So we went to school together, right? Asif was always the guy that stood first in class, and my parents would be like, "What is Asif doing? What are you doing with your life?" Right?
My parents still say the same to me.
Right? And I've been waiting to see how I can show my parents that Asif is not just all that, but he proved me wrong again and was able to deliver this acquisition. And there's a level of trust and comfort, right, when working with you guys, right? It's fully transparent. I mean, we have a relationship, and that kind of speaks for that, right? What have we known each other for? 20 years plus?
30 plus years.
30 plus years, yeah. And I mean, signing Bidzi on was like, it was easy because there's a level of trust that you work with someone. And it's simple, right? There's no hidden fees. We were not exposed. There was no investment from our side, right? So that kind of speaks for the work that you guys do, because you guys are so confident in terms of delivering, right? That's why you guys make that investment first to get the acquisition done. And I think that kind of, in a sense, number one, gives us comfort, but also gives us some kind of assurity that if you are investing your time into it, when we are not effectively fiscally at any loss for it, it's easy.
Yeah, we need to look at that side of things, Asif. I think maybe some upfront or retainers. Yeah, we should look into that more. Maybe now you've been acquired. Maybe there are acquisitions that you guys will be looking at in the future, so we can relook at those things.
Yeah, maybe at the same deal that we did for this, perhaps. But yeah, it's just easy to sign up because we don't lose anything.
Yeah,
got it.
Right. And we set a target in mind, and we had these tick boxes that we needed to tick off, and they were ticked off, and without us having to invest anything per se. So the time was all yours, right?
You're happy.
Yeah, I'm happy. I mean, there's always a sense of emotion that comes along with it and says, okay, you leave the office saying, is this mine anymore? But again, to my buyers, they haven't made me feel that way. So of course I'm happy. Yeah, it's the company is growing. We're looking at a lot more opportunity, things that we could never be a part of before, right? And that's true real happiness, because I get to deliver what I really think about with people that I never had access to before. It's just that simple.
Yep. Yeah, with the right backing in place now.
With the right backing in place, right?
Perfect.
I want to now get into some of the nitty-gritty of the deal and how it was for you. So, look, the starting point, obviously, we sat with you and your team. We came up with a valuation that worked for you guys and we felt was a fair value for us to be able to take it to market. What was your biggest sort of learning, right, from the process? What is there that you didn't maybe realize would be involved or just didn't expect to happen in this sort of transaction? Because I know it was a first for you. Is there anything that sort of surprised you, things that you walked away from the deal afterwards thinking, wow, that was interesting, I didn't think it would be like that? And any ideas, any points there?
I think there's a lot that goes forward with the buyers and the sellers, right? So everybody has a different way to look at things. And I think a key element with working with Bidzi is they connect the two, right? So the purview of the buyer and the purview of the seller needs to be aligned for the sale to happen. And I think Bidzi was efficient in trying to make that happen, right? As a seller, I may see things differently. I may value things differently. As a buyer, I may not value it the same way, or vice versa. And Bidzi kind of brought a level to that, right? That was, I think, one of the good things that we had going together. And that was all about working together, talking it out, understanding, not just with us, with the buyer as well, right? And then you've got the legal aspect of it, where I'm a science guy, right? So going through 30 pages of SPA paperwork and NDAs is really not my forte and really not within my interest. Reading the fine line, understanding the fine line, interpreting the fine line, I think there's so much behind that we don't really have a hands-on on. And I think Bidzi had a lot to do with making sure that, as sellers we were protected, and I presume as buyers they were protected too.
Yeah.
Bringing fairness to both sides of the transaction, I think, was key in what Bidzi did. And I think that was a great element that you guys offered. And that was not something I envisioned that I would really need to take. Like, I didn't think it would be that difficult in terms of paperwork, legalities, going back and forth on the SPA and, understanding the fine line in terms of section C, 0.3C and all of that. That was too much. But I think Bidzi helped align those things.
That section, I recall, says that you need to be in the office till 8:30 p.m. every night, especially on Christmas, I think.
Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, those kind of things, were things that we really, look to Bidzi to kind of help us truly understand what they are and then align our interests with the buyers.
So, looking back, what do you think was the toughest point throughout this whole endeavor? Was it legal stuff? Was it the due diligence? Was it showing your numbers and, kind of going down into granular details? Was it expanding on the value proposition of your different revenue streams? What do you think was the toughest point or the toughest part of this entire process for you?
I think the toughest point for me personally was then becoming a member of the Bidzi team, basically, because I was then translating what the buyer was telling to me and then retranslating it to my father, who's of a different generation and a thought process, and then taking that information and translating it back into the buyer. So I think I ended up being part of Bidzi in this whole transaction. And that, I think, is another challenge that most SMEs face as well, because you've got these founders from a previous generation who are exiting their business, and they have a different level of understanding of how things work, and they have not done this before maybe, and you've kind of got to translate that down to what is happening in the transaction and take that to a granular approach. Okay. So I think that was my biggest challenge, was trying to package what the buyers were saying, how we were aligning, and then taking that to my father, who has a completely different school of thought. And I think that goes a long way with a lot of SMEs here today, with how the older generation understands things, how we understand things, how buyers understand things, and how the buyers management understands things. So there's 4 or 5 different parties involved that need to kind of align for things to happen. And I think that was a challenge, right, in our transaction.
No, I think you've touched on a great point, actually, which is especially in family-owned businesses where you've got the founding generation that's, reaching the latter part of their business journey, and the next gen is taking over. Absolutely. Translating things for something that they can understand and that they can get on board with is key. And I think that's a credit to you. You obviously did that effectively, because we've seen examples of deals where that's not done effectively and they just can get shut down at any stage.
Absolutely.
We've almost found that the patriarchal founder is looking for ways to kill the deal, because it's a very emotional thing for them.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times he was looking to kill this one. So, it's the honest truth, right? Because you wake up in the morning and you think of something completely different, and you're like, oh, this is not how I want it. Let's kill it. And then I have to go and then kind of bring that focus back online. And then there are days where my dad was just like, why isn't this done so yet? Why haven't we done it yet? What's happening? So just aligning on the journey and making sure that the wheels are turning and making sure things are smooth was, I think, a key challenge in the acquisition.
So I guess you had to wear the hats of being a mediator as well as an interpreter.
Absolutely.
Right? Because not only were you aligning your father, who's the owner of the business, but you also have to align that with your buyer and make sure that interests on both sides were met.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you look at everybody sees financial statements differently, right? So everybody understands them differently. Everybody interprets valuation differently. And I think bringing a level of understanding where everybody's on the same line takes a lot, whether it's an SME or a large firm or whatever. So trying to put that together, I think, was a challenge. And I think Bidzi had a lot to help align that. Did a lot for that. So that was good. Perfect.
Yeah, look, our interests are always aligned, especially when we have a sell-side mandate. We are on the side of the seller, where we want to get the maximum value. Now, of course, the challenge comes if you have sellers, and we've had these set of sellers that place hyperbolic valuations on their business. But our job is to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that there's a realistic value, that the seller understands that, because that's how we can go to market and bring in the best buyers for it. And I think we as a team managed to achieve that very well on this transaction. Hence, we're sitting here today.
Yeah, I mean, the valuation is also the perspective of the founder and the people in it, right? So there's some level of understanding that needs to happen for an acquisition to happen. So that, and I think we were able to achieve that. So yeah, I mean, today, just on business valuations and real estate valuations, I think it's just unbelievable, right? So you look at different houses, for example, and there are different numbers. Today, 10 has become 15, 15 has become 20. So valuation today is, I feel...
Time to move to real estate.
Today, if you want to buy a house, you need to sell your business. There's more returns. The house market has just gone bananas.
Yeah.
So Joshua, having been through the intense process of due diligence, what advice would you give to other sellers that are looking at an exit journey? Or in particular, what are the key aspects of a business do you think that potential buyers are looking for in a business that they hope to acquire?
Clean books, in simplicity. So you want to have 2 or 3 years kind of very clear cut, clean, and ready to go. So most family businesses, especially in our world, consider, their business to be part of their home.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you tend to kind of not have accurate numbers in terms of what your spend is, things like that. And I think making sure your business is your business and your home is your home as a family business is, I think, key if you are planning to be in a position where you want to sell it. So I think pre-due diligence, you need to have all of these things in place. And I think once you have that, then due diligence becomes very easy, right? Because then it's kind of like everything is clean, clear cut. And that becomes very easy in terms of, the questions that you're asked, or for the buyer to go through the numbers, for the buyer to understand the business. And the more he understands, the less he asks, and the less difficult it is. So if you set the foundation in terms of clear books, clear-cut numbers, everything is clean from the beginning, I think that's the basis of a smoother due diligence, in my opinion.
So some simple housekeeping, make sure that the gardener and the nanny is not on the company books.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just the gardener and the nanny, right? So basic expenses that, you'd never thought of that you have. For example, your family ticket every 2 months, for example, is on the books of the company. That at the end of the day adds up and takes away from your bottom line, I would say. And then, you're at a place where you see your bottom line a lot differently, and the buyer sees the bottom line a lot differently. But to go through the journey of explaining to the buyer that, these things don't fiscally exist and our bottom line is actually this, and that journey is very difficult. So where we want to be is we want to make sure that we have clarity from the beginning, and then we can take that forward. So
otherwise, the whole conversation goes around adjusted EBITDA.
Absolutely. So that adjusted EBITDA is something that a lot of SMEs need to do, right? And to get to that agreed adjusted EBITDA becomes a challenge.
Got
so
it.
When you have those clean books, then you don't have to, even though your EBITDA ends up being adjusted or may be adjusted, it may be a simpler way to get to that point.
Got it.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, Joshua, and that's something that all companies need to do. What we didn't have that with your transaction at all, but what we see in a lot of businesses for sale is that they've optimized for corporate tax, and optimizing for corporate tax is not optimizing for an exit, because people are trying to put in all sorts of expenses, maybe paying a maximum salary they can, which is possibly beyond what is market standard. So that's something that I think all sellers that are listening need to have a balanced view on, right? You don't just want to optimize for corporate tax. You want to look at the long term if you've got exit in mind. Otherwise, like you said, this adjusted EBITDA conversation start, and that opens the door for buyers to try to negotiate and drop the price.
Yeah, I think for people who own their businesses, I think there should be some clarity on what the vision is, right? Is my vision to turn into a seller? Is my vision to kind of grow the business? Is my vision to continue capitalizing on the business? And I think once you have that long-term 3-5 year vision, then you kind of operate the business the way you want. So I'm not against optimizing for corporate tax by any standard of imagination, but if your plan is to turn into a seller, then you probably want to make sure that you've got some clean books, people understand what the real value of the business is, and that really then directly plays into the conversation of valuation.
So the next sort of obvious phase after due diligence has happened, right? That's when the real fun of the transaction starts, right? Negotiations, especially around the SPA, potentially around employment contracts for people that are staying on. How was that phase for you in terms of the negotiation? Is there anything that you learned from your journey that you didn't know before? And if someone came to you looking to sell and wanted your guidance, that you'd share those nuggets that you've learned with them?
Probably the opportunity to ask for more.
What do you mean by that?
And the reality that it's probably available. Right?
Okay.
Because the buyers are always also starting at some benchmark where they have probably got a little more bandwidth for you. And we saw that where we started off and we ended was fairly different. So I think the opportunity to ask for more, and I think as someone who founded this business, I think as a founder you need to kind of level out, be realistic about where you think the value of the business is. Understand one, trading business versus manufacturing business, primary, secondary, tertiary industry. So which industry are you in? And how businesses value each other in that market or in that industry per se, no matter what field you're in. If you're in the primary sector, tertiary sector, secondary sector, all those valuations align. So as a trading business in the secondary sector, what is the EBITDA factor that people are offering in the market? In primary, you're developing a product or you're doing something novel. What is the EBITDA you can expect? And then in the service sector, what is the EBITDA you can expect? So I think aligning yourself with how the industry pays for what sector you're in is key in terms of where you should be. So that's kind of my thoughts around that, really.
Yeah. And I guess that's really a critical piece, right? Valuation is ultimately the key driver, especially for the buyers and the sellers. We didn't have a very complicated negotiation around the SPA. I think that was relatively smooth. And I think that's partly down to the fact that there was a sophisticated buyer.
Right.
Were there any moments during that phase that you or Dad felt, no, I don't like this, or it's too risky, or I want to walk away?
So for us, I think, with our buyer, I think the benchmark in terms of our outlook on valuation was set on day one. So pre-looking at the books, we kind of had, these numbers that we had in mind, and that I think the buyer had a very good sense of that from the day one. And once that foundation is set for the buyer, if he's still interested and is still part of the journey, that means he aligns with the vision. And we were very grateful that we were on the same page with our seller in that respect. So I think from day one, once that number was valued, or that the idea of what the business is worth was set at that level, that was kind of where we were aligned, and that made it smoother.
Yeah.
Right. And then that translates to conversations being easier.
Yeah.
Right. So if you set clarity on that from day one, and the seller understands that is, the ballpark of which he needs to play with, that kind of then brings to terms, that makes valuation conversations and negotiation conversations a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
Because they're already in the same matrix or in the same field.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Once that's aligned on, generally other points can be ironed out and worked through.
And I think what we saw in this transaction was most of the SPA terms were aligned on during the process, during the DD process. So when it came to the actual legal document negotiation, most of the terms were already aligned.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much negotiation, or it took a lot of time to kind of be signed.
Absolutely. So I think something that Bidzi really helped us with was understanding what the SPA terms would be before they were on the table, and kind of aligning the buyer with how we intend it to be. Yeah. And I think that really helped in terms of making things a lot smoother, right? So you knew what we were looking for, and the buyers knew what we were looking for. And before the SPA was even drafted, the thought process was already there. So when the SPA was drafted, it was drafted with a certain thought process, and it eventually made things a lot easier.
They say hindsight is 20/20.
Right.
Looking back at this entire transaction, if there was one thing that you could change, what would that be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think there was a lot of... so most family businesses, as I said, associate their business with home. And I think if I was to start a business again, I don't have any plans to, but if I was to ever go down that route again, I'd kind of make sure that my business is my business, my numbers in my business are my business, and my home is my home. So I would treat them completely independently. And that goes a long way, not only in terms of acquisitions, in terms of working with banks, in terms of, just understanding the true health of the business. So we never really truly understood the health of our own business until we went through the due diligence process with Bidzi, right? So truly understanding the real value of the business was only found out after the due diligence process was done.
Yeah, and I think that's true in, I'd say, 90% of businesses that we work with. It's very rare to come across a first-time seller that has prepared the business for an exit years in advance.
Right.
But you're absolutely right, Joshua. I think that's a key set of learning. And if you're ever in that position again, I'm sure you'll approach it years in advance, knowing that once we hit certain level, we're looking to exit.
And it may not just be for an acquisition. It may be to bring in an investor or to bring in a bank or to do any of that stuff. And we actually found out that we probably are worth more than what we were thinking the business is worth. And that stands for a lot of businesses in the as in the market today. So
that discipline of segregating expenses and isolating them between what is professional and personal goes a long way in maintaining the financial health of the company, keeping it exit ready, and just opening up new opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Joshua, you've gone through that journey, that rite of passage. You've sold the business. You're now, you're still in the business very much. I guess your day-to-day probably hasn't changed that much. But now that this is done, and now that you've got these, new ownership buyers with a shared vision to grow, where do you see MiLab 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do you think that journey is going to look like now?
I think the opportunities that we are getting exposed to are, cannot even be defined at this point. We're getting to backward integrate our business, forward integrate our business, just do so much that we didn't have before. And 5 years from now, it's the vision is key to be, to kind of really be a key solution provider. And that's kind of something that I think MiLab's vision also aligns with you guys, right? And why we picked you guys, because you guys are a full solution, right? So whether it comes to legal, whether it comes to negotiation, just helping hand along the journey, right? I think that was a key differentiator between other solutions that we have in the market. And I think a lot of people today don't really value full solution selling, right? And that all-in-one approach, I think, is so important because we directors or founders, we've got the business to run on a daily basis, and we don't want to get involved into the nitty-gritty of what's happening with the transaction.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys took care of that while looking at our interests and understanding where we came from was, I think, very important. And the legal aspect of it, the financial aspect of it, and the negotiation came together from our approach without us being there. So I think that solution really thought process is what we needed. And that solution thought process is the vision of MiLab. So that effectively 5 years from now, we really hope to kind of be unique solution providers for high throughput screening and testing. That's pretty much where we intend to be.
Wonderful. Well, Joshua, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Bidzi Way podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So until the next transaction, maybe you'll be on the buy side and we'll get you back.
Let's see.
Thank you once again, Joshua.
Thanks, guys.